So I would go so far as to say that Avatar: The Last Airbender is probably the best animated show ever produced in the West. Now that's a bold claim, and a lot of people will probably tell you that The Last Airbender is perfect. I'm not going to agree. It's very close though. It's for a 61 episode show, it's about as close to perfect as you can get. I rewatched the show recently, and really everything that I thought was wrong with it was really just because it was so short. Had it been given more time, I have so much faith that everything that I thought was the problem with the show could have been fixed. So I'd like to cover this book by book. The thing about Avatar, right? The show, it spends a lot of time doing nothing. And that works to its strength. In fact, that's one of the things that, like, it's probably the, like, most remembered for, and, like, why we all remember it so fondly. Because it spends so much time doing nothing, like, it doesn't, like, there are a lot of episodes, especially in Book 1, where not a whole lot of plot or important new characters are established, but what it does do is it just shows you, like, random adventures that these 3 random kids are having. And what that does is it just builds our attachment to those characters. It builds, builds our familiarity with them. It, like, kind of shows us the more human side of them. It doesn't show us just constant over-dramatic situations, constant having to save the world. Like, there is substance to the characters. And Book 1 especially does a great job of establishing that with Aang, Katara, and Sokka. Because there's, like, especially, like, right in the middle, there's, like, you know, you look at episodes like The Great Divide, and etc., like, what did that episode accomplish? Nothing. You know, at the end of the thing, all we figured out is Aang just lied. Aang lied to those 2 tribes to deal with their problems. But what that does is it kind of shows us, it presents that dynamic. It establishes the dynamic between these 3 main characters. So, which is very important, especially right at the beginning. So that's why one of the big reasons why I think all these characters in Avatar feel just more like real human characters, more so than a lot of other cartoons of this nature. That's probably the best thing about the first book. The first 2 episodes might be like the best introduction to a show ever. Just the way it establishes the conflict, the dynamic between the characters, the nature of, like, the comedy and action, like the way it blends all of those different aspects so well. It really just establishes what the show is going to be for the next, what, 58, 59 episodes? So, yeah, it's hard to argue with how good that is. Like, those first 2 episodes are a wonderful intro to the show. Basically, the only problem I had with Book 1 was at the end, they go to the Northern Water Tribe, they get to the Northern Water Tribe, they see Master Pakku, and Aang and Katara start, like, actual waterbending training. Which is, like, basically what they spent the whole first season trying to do. So that's good and everything. Basically, my biggest issue was Katara went from being rejected from the class to basically being Pakku's star student in no time at all. Like, basically, at the end of one episode, she's, like, accepted into the class, and then by the beginning of the next one, all of a sudden, she's, like, a master waterbender. There's no transition there, and it's not fluid at all, and it doesn't really make any sense. Because Katara started out the first season as, like, this really sloppy waterbender, but obviously very powerful. In just, like stuff we don't even see, all of a sudden she's now considered a master waterbender by the best waterbender probably in the world. It just doesn't work. Like, I get that she's already powerful and that really all she needed was, like, basically getting the formal training necessary to be able to control the power she has. But still, it's like, at least maybe like an 80s training montage would be cool, right? You know, something. Not just being accepted to the class at the end of one episode, and then next one she's murdering all of her classmates with, like, no mercy. There's not really a transition there. And again, I feel like that could have been easily fixed, and they would have done a great job with it had they gotten literally just one more episode in that season. I could complain about how they're doing nothing, like, for some of the episodes, and that some of the episodes don't really matter, but again, it establishes the dynamic between all the characters, and that's very important, especially for the first season. Even, like, the way they focus on Zuko, at first it doesn't seem like much, but, like, they're really just, like, playing the long game for Zuko's character arc, which, by the way, Zuko probably has the single best character arc of any fictional character in history. I would go that far. But again, I think that's really going to be something we talk about for Book 3. Now again, like, because there's not any episodes that really stand out to me as bad. Obviously, The Storm is where we learn the backstories of Aang and Zuko is incredible. Like, often considered the best episode because it shows the similarities between Aang and Zuko. And that it's really incredible. Like, it shows just how similar they really are, even though they're on opposite sides of the war. Probably the worst episode, and generally considered to be the worst episode of the series, is The Great Divide. And really that's just because it didn't accomplish anything. Like, it was literally just kind of pointless arguing for the entire episode, but that doesn't mean it wasn't entertaining, because it was. And again, it further established the dynamic between all the characters and making them feel more real and human, which is very important for a show that focuses a lot on fantastical, overdramatic plots involving all these, bending scenes. Despite their abilities to bend, which are very, not realistic, the characters, on the other hand, themselves feel very realistic, which is awesome. That's it for Book 1. For Book 2, I almost would go as far as to say that it is, as far as, like, objectively what it needed to accomplish and avoiding the time constraints, Book 2 is probably the most well done, because I don't think I have a major complaint about Book 2. One thing I would really like to point out is that recently I actually learned that Toph was originally designed to be like some bulky teenager earthbender, and Toph is probably one of the most memorable, if not the most memorable, character of the entire show. She's blind, for one, and sees with her earthbending, and she's a small girl who beats the shit out of people. That's awesome. So I couldn't imagine having like a stereotypical earthbender type. Like, if you were to hear earthbender, I couldn't imagine that being a stereotype. Like, Toph is absolutely essential to, like, the way the story goes. Like, without Toph, Avatar is definitely not as cool as it is, just because it was like one of the first shows that really just had these girls who are just beating the shit out of people like it was nothing. And the reason Avatar is so good with things like that, and they present their strong women in a great way, is because they don't go like, I'm a girl and I can be strong. Like, there are obviously moments of, like, blatant sexism, but that's to just further establish the fact that it's like a traditional society. Girls are usually the ones that are considered the mom types or the caring stuff. But the way they go about actually presenting, like, people like Toph and Katara and Azula even, it's just natural. Like, they don't make a big deal out of it. And that's how it should be. They're just, like, it shouldn't matter if it's a guy or a girl. Like, regardless of what gender they are capable of beating the shit out of you. That's just, and they don't go out of their way to be like, I'm the strongest girl bender in the nation, whatever. Like, it's just, I'm a fucking badass girl and I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. Like, it's very natural feeling, and that's very good. The introduction to Azula is excellent, and just, Azula is really good. One of the best villains, I think, in animated television. She's just, like, the way especially the way she's presented in the second season, terrifying. Unlike Book 1, there's not a whole lot of just nothing. A lot of I'm sure, I can't remember off the top of my head, there's probably like one or two where nothing is really accomplished, but basically everything they do in Book 2 is necessary. They go to the library, they go to the Earth King, Bossing Say, all this other crap. So pretty much everything they do, earthbending training, it's all necessary and part of, like, developing the story in a good way and developing the characters and all this other stuff. If you look at it from a storytelling standpoint, Book 2 isolated. At the very first episode, you learn how if Aang dies in the Avatar state, the Avatar cycle is ended for good. And then at the end of book 2, like the last scene is Aang presumably getting killed in the Avatar state. So the storytelling is off the charts good. Just really, it's not even necessarily like creative or like out of the ordinary or like, you know, groundbreaking stuff. It's literally just fundamentally solid storytelling that wraps up, you know, that season in a really good way. So I think objectively book 2 is the one I have the least issues with. Like pretty much everything felt necessary. I guess the only one that I don't really like is the Cave of Two Lovers. That's a bit of a fucking weird one, but I mean, it was something. Those guys were really high and shit. Oh god. This fucking the stoners, god. Now, I think for book 3, while it is the one that I have the most problems with, it's probably also the best season of the show, and therefore the best show of, like, the best season of any season in animated television produced in the West. Like, it's very good, but the thing is, basically my biggest problem is, again, it's down to time constraints. It tries to accomplish a whole fucking lot in the very limited time that it has. Now, I could sit here and ramble to you all day about how beautifully animated the final fight between Aang and Ozai was. No one cares. Like, you all know, I don't need to say that. I don't need to tell you, I mean, I'm gonna say it anyway, but, you know, episodes like the Southern Raiders, very, just incredibly well produced in every single way. Voice acting performances off the charts good, storytelling is fantastic, just character work and writing and dialogue is beautiful. Just random episodes like that, and especially the very end. I'm a big fan of basically Zuko's redemption arc, where he basically slowly gains everyone's trust, you know, over the Boiling Rock, over the Firebending Masters, over the Southern Raiders. Like, how Zuko gains the rest of the people's trust is just really well done, and it makes sense. Like, Zuko has to go out of his way to basically gain their trust, and I like how it goes gradually, one by one as well, and Katara being the last one makes sense storytelling-wise because of what happened at the end of book 2. Especially because that's such an emotionally driven thing for her, about how, you know, the guy who killed his mom is now in a really just pathetic state. It's just, the Southern Raiders is one of the best episodes of the show, for sure. It's definitely, like, one of those ones that's, like, not appreciated as much as it should be. Katara's performance in that one is, like, bone-chilling. It's really good. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of episodes that just do nothing. I would argue that the one, I'm trying to think of it, the one where Aang spends the entire episode fretting over the invasion, I would argue that, you know, being an entire episode probably wasn't necessary. It was funny. I don't think it was worth the whole episode, though. So, I can't remember the name of it, but the one right before the Day of Black Sun. That was a weird one. But everything else was almost entirely necessary because it kind of illustrates the process of Azula kind of losing her shit and how all of her friends turn against her and why they turn against her, and, you know, and especially Zuko, how Zuko basically, now he has everything he ever wanted, but it's not what he expected, and it turns out it's not actually what he wants. I would argue that perhaps there should have been something a little more concrete there in between Zuko basically telling Mai, like, this isn't what I wanted, and then basically 2 episodes later he's going to his dad and being like, yeah, I'm gonna go help the Avatar. It makes sense if you really think hard about it, but I would just argue for, I guess, just for convenience or whatever, like, something more concrete should have been there, something more like, even if it like, in the very subtle Avatar style that it does character arcs in. You know, like, Zuko's entire character arc has a lot of really subtle things, like facial expressions, that you have to look for in each individual episode to kind of witness the character arc unfold. It's very subtle. something subtle like that in between him saying this isn't what I wanted and then him deciding to join the Avatar. But yeah, just Zuko, like his transition there, and even his awkward stuff, like in the episode where he joins up with Team Avatar, and his awkward, basically trying to introduce himself to, like, to a frog or whatever. Like, it makes sense in, like, in the context of his character, because obviously, and the context of the story, because obviously he would have to try, like, he's nervous about, you know, trying to become friends with these people who he chased down for a few months. Like, it makes sense. As awkward as it is, it's that character building thing. It makes them feel more human, which is something Avatar just does so well. It's like these characters that they establish these characters in a way that, like, they feel real and you want them to be real. You wish they were real. It's just really incredible. So by the time Zuko does join up with the team, because of how established his character is, it feels natural from almost right off the bat, which is really impressive. Like, even Toph, like, you know, kind of trusting him and then him accidentally burning her. This just, you know, silly stuff like that. It just all really makes sense in terms of, you know, how the story has progressed up until that point. Basically, my biggest problem with Book 3 is that it had, and you know what, everything it did was necessary, but the biggest thing is that it does too much in not a lot of time. It has to resolve too many loose ends. It has to, like, develop a bunch of characters, finish off character arcs with not enough time to do that. A few things. I would argue that the battle between Aang and Ozai should have been longer. It didn't feel as complete as it should have. And again, the whole Avatar State arc and the Deus Ex Machina of Aang being able to take away his bending thanks to running into a lion turtle. There's a lot that had to happen that they had to squeeze into this, and a lot that just ended up kind of falling flat, at least for me. It just didn't really make sense. Like, I think the issue of Aang not wanting to kill the Fire Lord should have been established at the beginning of the season, not at the beginning of the Sozin's Comet quadrilogy. That should have been the thing they were worried about for a longer time than just those 4 episodes, because that would have made the impact of Aang being able to take bending away a lot more effective. And then the lion turtle doesn't really make any sense. It's just really weird. That's probably the biggest thing for me. And also that Aang and Ozai's battle should have been longer. It just felt incomplete. Like, they battled for a little bit, Aang ran away, and then he eventually got hit in the back, and he activated the Avatar State. The Avatar State arc feels incomplete as well, because, like, he locked his chakra, but then didn't unlocked it, and then got shot with lightning. It's just really weird. Like, there's a lot that happened and a lot that doesn't quite get explained. Like, I know Avatar has that very subtle style about it. It's just, it left me kind of confused because I wasn't sure what's going on. A lot of the spiritual stuff that it covers is oftentimes, like, feels incomplete. But other than that, like, I mean, what else would there be? I'm sure there's something else. Like, I like the meeting with the White Lotus people. That's really awesome. But again, it feels like the last few episodes just should have been like 1 or 2 more episodes, because it feels like, just given the amount of time, like, it should have been more epic. Just in general, like, it's already incredibly epic. Like, Sokka, Suki, and Toph taking down the fleet of airships, that, when you're watching it, it is like, you know, it's going on at the same time as all this other final conflict stuff. But it actually doesn't take that long, so it doesn't feel as important as it probably should feel. Same with the White Lotus taking back Ba Sing Se. Like, it happens, and it just, like, it's really quick, and you don't really get a chance to digest it, and really by the time you've digested everything that's already happened, Aang has beaten the Fire Lord, and he's dressed up for the new Fire Nation coronation ceremony. Or Fire Lord coronation ceremony for Zuko. It's like, everything happens in those last 4 episodes really fast, and it's not quite as thorough as I want it to be. Maybe that's just a personal thing, but it just doesn't feel as complete as the series has been like building it up to be. Even though those last 4 episodes are incredible in their own right, it's just everything feels so rushed. There's a lot of good things about them, you know, like Aang meditating to call upon his past lives and stuff. It's really cool, but it's just, they do so much, and they don't necessarily have time to do it all. I blame Nickelodeon. I blame Nickelodeon. No, it's just, and it is down to time constraints, because they're only granted so many episodes, and like, when you get a TV deal, you only have so many episodes. So, I'm sure more could have been done had they been given an opportunity for it. If this had gotten 25 episodes, like if this season had gotten 25 episodes, we would have been in much better shape. As it stands, we got 21. And it's just not, it's not as complete as it should be. Another thing I have an issue with, the ending, again, it happens really fast. I'm all for Katara and Aang. I know people are vehemently in support of Zuko and Katara. That's not really my thing. I really like Aang and Katara together. But their last, like the end of the very last scene when they kiss, it feels weird because, I mean, the romance is not Avatar's strong point. We all know that. It's not like the romance has been bad up until this point. But really, the only thing we got was that during the recap episode, the Ember Island players, basically like Aang gets jealous of a play for some reason. Like, I get he's a kid, it makes sense, right? He kind of gets carried away, and then he tries to kiss Katara, but she's confused, so she doesn't know what she wants. But then by the end, they just kiss and everything's dandy. So I think that should have been like kind of at least like. Let's say even if both of them got literally one line, like there are 2 lines at the very end during that scene where they kiss, it would have been better. Like it should have just established that finality, and it just didn't happen. Instead, they just kind of hug. And again, it's the subtle thing that Avatar likes to do, but it's just, it doesn't quite work for me. But it's like, it just doesn't, it feels incomplete. I know it's like, again, it's the subtle thing, they love it, but it just doesn't feel like it completes that romance arc that they had going on throughout the entire show. Like, they could have just both gotten one line to basically just establish, like, hey, I'm not confused anymore, the war is over, yeah, you wanna suck me off? No, obviously not, but, you get the idea. Like, just something to establish that finality. I guess that's my biggest problem with book 5 is, or not book 5, book 3. Yeah, it just, it doesn't quite, like, just the amount that they try to do doesn't quite work for me. I mean, I get they had certain time constraints, but the character arcs resolve in a good way, each one does. Zuko's character arc ends with his Fire Lord coronation. It all makes sense, but it doesn't feel like the last bit was as complete as it should have been. I think I've done enough to kind of illustrate what I mean when I say that, but I mean, other than that, you know, the Eclipse raid fading, or the Eclipse invasion failing was a stroke of genius. Especially in the way, like, everything makes sense storytelling wise, and everything, like, you can follow if you've been paying attention, like, you could follow everything that happens, and it all makes sense. It's just, really, I guess my biggest issues are with the last 4 episodes. Also, it feels like Zuko there should have been, like, maybe a nothing episode, or a character, like a dynamic establishing episode with Zuko in it, because Zuko wasn't actually part of the group for a very long time. Really was only for it, like, you know what, the last 9 episodes? And half the time Zuko was off doing his own thing. I will say though, the Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula is probably the best part about those last 4 episodes. Is not only is it beautifully animated and visually just stunning, but I think it concludes Zuko's character arc properly, and Azula's as well. Like, by basically Azula losing her shit, and, you know, attacking Katara, Zuko gets hurt by the lightning, whatever, protects Katara, etc. Like, it all makes sense. Obviously, the battle between Aang and Ozai is just incredible. Probably the best final battle of any television show. But even so, it feels like, just given how much it's been building up to this point, you know, fights don't necessarily take long. It didn't have to take that much longer, but again, it feels just like something, it could have been more than it was. And I was expecting more, you know, like I was expecting the battle to just be a little longer. There wasn't actually a whole load of dialogue between those two. I know that's more realistic and it makes sense. Like, there didn't need to be a whole lot of dialogue. It's just like I guess it's just kind of them going back and forth a bit, like discussing ideals. Stuff like that would have been more conclusive. You know what I mean? That's pretty much it on The Last Airbender. I'm in the process of reading the comics. We'll see how those go. They're really good so far. I've only read the first one, but and I mean The Promise Part 1. I haven't even finished reading The Promise. But it's just really, like, the way it continues the story is very good. Also, one last thing I wanted to mention. Obviously, Korra is no Avatar The Last Airbender. It's not as good. But it is a pretty good show on whatever I was watching. Like, Korra, the first episode of Korra just started immediately after the last episode of... and I've watched Korra before all the way through. The ending is kind of disappointing to this day, but... one thing that I kind of grew to appreciate through that is the contrast between Aang and Korra. If they were gonna make an official, like, continuation of Avatar, this was absolutely the only way they could have gone about it. If the next Avatar had been too similar to Aang, it just would have felt like, you know, a crappy fan fiction. Establishing Korra as this rough and tumble girl, like, who just is really super strong physically, but is kind of lacking spiritually, and also is just, like, tackles everything head on, is a great contrast to Aang, who's pretty much the opposite. You know, Korra's foul-mouthed, you know, speaks out of turn, does whatever she wants. Aang is like kind of this nervous, spiritual airbender boy. Like, the contrast there is fantastic. Yeah, it just all makes sense. Like, the next Avatar really needed to be a lot different from Aang, and the way they present Korra is really good. So, I guess that's about it. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that. Gonna try to be uploading a little more frequently, but we'll see. Obviously, if you want to hear me talk more, you can check out the Firestorm podcast, where I talk once a week, guaranteed, for about an hour. So yeah, but this was fun. Anyway, thanks for listening. Go watch this show if you haven't. I don't know why you're watching this if you haven't watched this show, but anyway, yeah, see you all later.